The most recent Guild Wars 2 Living Story introduced a dragon response mission type of game mode, which is basically just a dialogue plus a little bit of story instance where you're out in like an open world map, but it's an instanced version of that map, and then you're just killing dragon minions, and then there's like a boss at the end. And it's pretty simple but pretty effective in my opinion. However, the community did not receive it very well, and there was a lot of hate for it because of inconveniences, lack of engagement, and poor balancing. But I saw the potential of it because, yes, there were a lot of issues, but still, there was potential because it allowed you diversity in how you could play the game. It wasn't just stacking on top of each other and doing, DPS rotation that you would do on a golem. There was a little bit of movement around the map, so it didn't so much focus on just throwing AoE down, but more so builds that had mobile damage would be a little bit more effective. So I really like this because it reminded me of dungeons. So I made a video, and it was a pretty controversial video because I was basically saying that dragon response missions were good, and that, yeah, there were some issues with it, but there were a lot of changes that I suggested as well. And now, here we are, Dragon Response Missions number 2, and ArenaNet is actually engaging with the feedback that they've received, and they've improved Dragon Response Missions quite a bit by removing a lot of those inconveniences and making them a lot more engaging, especially on the bosses. So that's one thing that is really good, is that the bosses have a lot more mechanics now. The mobs are kind of around the same level, to be honest. On the challenge modes, they can kind of be engaging, but it really depends. A lot of people are complaining about how these dragon response missions were reusing old maps and it was just lazy. But to me, that's more meaningful than just going to a new map because, oh, look, the bad guys went here now, and we gotta chase them here. It's not really as meaningful, and yeah, the reusing of the content might be more convenient for ArenaNet, but I think that it's probably also appropriate in this situation because if we're just going to a new place every time, well, it doesn't hold as much threat, because why do we care that this place is being attacked that we just arrived here today? It would be much more meaningful if it was a place that we've been map completing for all these years, or we've been living in. I think that it's probably better that we go to old maps because it actually gives more meaning to it. But the most important thing is that there is a scaling for how many players are in the zone. So most PvE content that is kind of like end game is usually like 5-man in like fractals, dungeons, and the balancing for that is not really that engaging because if you 5-man something, you're usually not going to need to worry about dying because you're always going to have a support, and it just kind of makes the meta of we just have a Alacrity, a Firebrand, and then like 3 DPS. It just solidifies that even more. But when there is a varying number of party members, your comp can change and you can optimize your build for those situations. So the fact that the content scales to how many players are in the party allows for a lot more build diversity just naturally because of how certain builds can be more optimal when they provide their own support, or if you want to run a comp that has like a kind of like duo kind of support synergy there. So for example, right now you're watching footage of a duo of the Snowden drifts with all the challenge modes, and what I'm doing here is I'm actually, because the NPC has like a escort kind of event, so I'm as a power herald providing swiftness to the NPC, so that, because the idea is that you're on a time limit here, right? So that's one of the major things that makes this kind of engaging, is that you have to optimize your play to beat that timer. and it kind of works with the story because you're trying to, spoiler alert, save the spirits of the wild in this mission, and if you're late, then you're going to fail and they're going to be corrupted. So it makes sense in the story, and it's just more engaging because there's a timer, so there's this sort of threat, and that's really kind of what the story is about. It's about the threat of the dragons. So the time limit not only kind of just works in terms of story, but it also makes it more engaging, and a timer that is also something that is relevant. Like if there's a timer and you just easily make it every time, well then there may as well not be a timer. So the fact that the balancing is a little bit better now is also really important. But anyways, as I was saying, I was giving swiftness to the mob, the Coden, because we have to escort them to the boss. And the faster we kill these mobs, and the faster that the escort moves, the more time we have to kill the boss. So I was working on giving swiftness to the escort while we're running around. We also have a Scourge, which is a little bit more effective on the final boss than I am. But the final boss is actually pretty important to understand a mechanic on it, because the boss is kind of hard to damage unless you have someone tanking it. So I tried to play a sort of more aggressive tank, so like a Power Herald, which is sort of survivable, and that way the Scourge can kind of land more of their damage, which is very based on the boss or whoever they're attacking to kind of be standing in their damage in their shades. So I tried to tank the boss while also doing a lot of damage myself, right? If I just play a full tank build, we wouldn't kill it in time. So I tried to play a sort of melee oriented class because that would allow me to keep the boss relatively stationary. And yeah, that's sort of like the play that you want to see in these small scale situations where you have to theory craft a composition and optimize. It's not because you want to play a meta, it's because you want to learn how your class works and how to adapt to the situation. That's how a real RPG should work, not that you should just load up a preset build of, oh, you want to do damage? Well, then you play this. That's not really an RPG, that's a MOBA, you know? We're playing Guild Wars 2 here. And the beauty of the theory craft that is potential, and as you can see here, I'm actually swapping my build. You can abuse templates in the middle of these as well. So I went a little bit more survivable when we get to the boss, and I went like pure damage before then. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and just knowing how your class works, it kind of teaches you to learn how to optimize around it. So once you get to the boss, spoiler alert, it's Ryland Steelcatcher. And one of the bigger mechanics that you have to watch out for is like this ice spike thing. If you get hit by it, you're going to get knocked down, and then there's going to be another ice spike, and it's going to like permanently knock you down until you die. So having stun breaks is actually pretty important on this encounter, or at least stability. So this is a pretty important mechanic too here, where they use the break bar. I didn't always have enough CC to break it, but as you can see here, we did. And that doesn't really do much, so I'm pretty sure that's bugged right now. But yeah, as you can see here, we're just trying to DPS the boss, and we have 6 minutes left, and we get ice spike, so we just wipe. That's another thing. Like, you want to have an encounter where the boss has the potential of killing you, not just hitting you like a wet noodle. Now obviously if you're in a 5-man, it's going to scale a little bit more differently, so you might not die as easily, but I'm pretty sure it's easier to do on 5-man, so I mean, that's fine. I think that's fine, but it's just nice that you can still do it on a low man. And yeah, so you want to watch out for the massive AoEs around the boss. There's always going to be like a safe spot right next to the boss, so meleeing is still possible. Obviously that's nice because you want to allow all kinds of gameplay. So it's a really good design, this boss, in my opinion, because it allows different types of gameplay. Now there is like this permanent protection on the boss or something like that, so power builds they do kind of have a disadvantage on this fight, but I didn't really have a good condition build that I wanted to run because I knew that I would be kiting the boss, and the boss is kind of hard to do damage to as a burn guardian, which is what I was using mostly on this kind of game mode of dragon response missions. So it was a little bit difficult for me to try that on this one because the boss would just move out of my symbols and then I would be doing like no damage. So I went for a power herald because a lot of my damage is instant, so the boss can't really move out of it. And yeah, here you have to just run around and kill the centurions, and these centurions are like denoted by the little skulls above their head. You don't really have to kill the mobs, but the mobs also kind of are annoying because they'll CC you and stuff and just tax you a lot of your health. So it's just such a dangerous encounter if you aren't really prepared for it. And yeah, sword 3 really good there, and you get into the little safe spot and you just DPS. The safe spot is now over there, and I don't think we got the CC bar there, so that's yeah, we're just gonna take a lot of damage here. I'm using my heal skill there to avoid all that damage. And yeah, the mobs are still up, but they're like attacking Bram, so I try to CC them off of Bram there, but or like the Coden. And yeah, it's just pretty, at this point it's pretty much the same thing. You just get it to 70% and then you do the little split phase, and then you get it to like 30 or 40% and then you do the split phase again. But yeah, just the fact that you have to avoid like the ground AoEs, I mean it's nothing new to Guild Wars 2, right? But it's definitely a lot better than the previous Dragon Response missions where you didn't have to avoid anything. And here you can see I got messed up by the spawn here because they're just standing right on top of us, and I had to avoid the ground AoEs at the same time. So that didn't really work out. We went down, but I got rallied, and that was pretty nice. So here's the final split phase. It's like, what was that, like 35%? And you have to be careful here. Like, I'm just trying to go very aggressive, and I can get punished here and go down. And that's the thing, is builds that are very aggressive and have no sustain, which is usually what you run in like a PvE environment, they're not the most effective here. So it's just really nice that there's so much more like thought to the actual crafting of builds and how to play the game rather than just me DPS and, you know, golem rotations. So it's just such an engaging encounter. I really like it, and as you can see, we're running pretty low on time, so I mean, probably there's a lot of better ways to do this, but you know, you don't want it to be too hardcore. You want it to have diversity. That's another important issue, is if something can only be done by the most optimal comp, then obviously it's going to feel like there is the meta, right? So that is one reason why ArenaNet tends to go on the lower spectrum of balancing to allow more things to be viable. But I think that there's still plenty of things that are viable on this encounter. And if you guys think, you know, you want to tell me about a comp that you used on this that worked out, do it in the comments below. And yeah, we're now going to do the final DPS phase on Ryland Steelcatcher. So I don't know why we're still trying to do CC, but we're doing it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I want to say. So just enjoy the rest of the video, and if you like it, subscribe and like the video, and I will see you next one.